Hi, I'm Tracy Rich from Judaism 101, jewfaq.org. Today we're going to do a quick overview of the Hebrew alphabet, just the names of each letter and how the letter is pronounced. If you'd like to try to read Hebrew, remember that Hebrew is written from right to left, not left to right as English is. Let's get started. Aleph, which is silent, or some would say, makes the sound before the A in apple. Aleph. Bet, which is pronounced B as in boy, or V as in victory. Native speakers know which way to pronounce it, just as we know how to pronounce the C's in circus. But in texts written for non-natives, like Hebrew-English prayer books or Bibles, you'll find a dot inside the bet when it's pronounced B, and no dot when it's pronounced V. This dot is not found in texts that are written for people fluent in Hebrew. Bet. Gimel is pronounced G as in good, never like in general, always like in good. Like most letters, it's pronounced the same whether there's a dot inside or not. Gimel. Dalet is pronounced like the D in door. Dalet. Hey is pronounced like the H in hello. Like H in English, it's silent at the end of words. Hey. Vav can be pronounced like the V in victory, the O in home, or the U in moon, which is usually transliterated as U. If there are no dots, it's pronounced V as in victory. If it has a dot on top, it's usually pronounced O as in home, but if the letter before it has a vowel of its own, then it does double duty, both V and O, pronounced vo. If it has a dot in the middle, it's usually pronounced U as in moon, but if the letter before it has a vowel of its own, then it's pronounced V, as in victory. Remember, those dots are only found in texts for non-natives. Vav. Zion is pronounced Z as in zebra. Zion. Chet is pronounced ch, a throat-clearing noise that doesn't occur in English. It's like in ach in German, or loch in Scottish. Chet. Tet is pronounced T as in tango. Tet. Yud is pronounced Y as in yellow. Sometimes Yud is part of the preceding vowel and is not pronounced at all. You can tell because it doesn't have a vowel of its own. But vowels, like dots, are not found in texts written for native speakers of Hebrew. Yud. Kaf sounds like the K in kangaroo, or the ch sound that chet makes. If there's a dot, it makes the K sound. If there's no dot, it's the ch sound. Kaf is written differently when it appears at the end of a word. There are 5 letters in Hebrew that have a special form for the end of a word. Final kaf almost never has a dot in it, so it's almost always pronounced ch, kaf, and final kaf. Lamed is pronounced L as in lucky. Lamed. Mem is pronounced M as in Mary. Mem is another letter that has a special final form. This is the final form of mem. Mem and final mem. Nun is pronounced N as in November. Nun is another letter that has a special final form. This is final nun. Nun and final nun. Samech makes an S sound as in Sahara. Samech. Ayin is silent like the letter Aleph. Ayin. Pei makes the sound of P as in pear, or F as in fox. If Pei has a dot inside, it makes the P sound. If there's no dot, it makes the F sound. Pei also has a special final form. Final Pei almost never has a dot inside, so it's almost always pronounced with the F sound. Pei and final Pei. Tzadi makes a TS sound like at the end of the word pants or nuts. Tzadi has a special final form, tzadi, and final tzadi. Kuf makes a sound like the K in kangaroo. It's sometimes transliterated as a Q to distinguish it from kaf, which also makes a K sound, and also because it comes from the same source as the letter Q in English. Kuf. Resh makes an R sound. Now most Americans pronounce it like the R in road, but Israelis pronounce it as more of a guttural sound. Resh. Shin makes an SH sound, as in show, or an S sound, as in so. When the dot is over the right branch, it makes the SH sound. When it's over the left branch, it makes the S sound. Shin. The last letter of the Hebrew alphabet is Tav, which makes a T sound, as in tango. Now, some older Jews and Orthodox Jews will pronounce this letter as an S sound if it doesn't have a dot inside, but most people pronounce it as T, with or without the dot. Tav. Now, I know I said that Tav was the last letter, but actually there's one more thing we need to talk about, and that's vowels. Like the dots we've seen before, you won't find vowels in texts in Israel. They're only found in texts written for non-natives. Let's start with patach, which looks like a dash under the letter. It's shown here with the letter aleph, which is silent. Patach makes the ah sound in father. You pronounce the patach after the consonant it goes with. So, for example, you would pronounce this, ba. Next is shava, which looks like a colon under the letter. Shava is either silent, or it makes a generic unstressed sound, like the e in begin. If it's the first vowel in a word, it makes the schwa sound. Otherwise, well, sorry, I don't know a good way to tell which way it goes. Sometimes you'll see what looks like a patach side by side with a shava under the letter. That's actually a separate vowel called chataf patach, or half patach. It makes the same ah sound as patach, but it's unstressed, never gets the emphasis. Next is kametz, which looks like the letter T. Kametz also makes the ah sound in father, at least for most people. Some older Jews and Orthodox Jews will pronounce this like the ah in saw. Nothing wrong with that pronunciation, but most people today pronounce it as ah. Now, just to make things as difficult as possible, kametz is sometimes pronounced differently, more of an O sound. Some texts write kametz differently when it's pronounced this way, and some make it larger or make the shaft longer, but most texts just write it the same way. If it's not written differently, I don't know a good way to tell which way it's pronounced, but you can pretty much assume that it's going to be an ah sound. The most common word that uses this unusual pronunciation is kol, which means all. Just like patach, kametz sometimes appears with a shava, making a new vowel called chataf kametz, half kametz. Still sounds like the ah in father, but it never gets the emphasis. Okay, let's try something easier. This is segol, which is a triangle of dots. Segol makes the eh sound in bed. Segol can also appear with a shava, making chataf segol, an unstressed eh sound. And that's the last of the chataf vowels. This is cholam, a dot above and to the left of the consonant. It's the only vowel point that's not written below the letter. Cholam makes the O sound in home. If this sounds familiar, that's because you've seen it before, on top of the vav. This is kibbutz, which is 3 diagonal dots. It makes the short U sound in put. Next is tsere, 2 dots side by side. It's pronounced like the A in neighbor or they. Sometimes it's followed by a yud that doesn't have a vowel of its own. When you see that, the yud is part of the tsere vowel and isn't pronounced separately. And that's the way I learned it, and that's the way I hear it in America, but I gather that in Israel, it's pronounced A when it has a yud, and eh when it doesn't have a yud. You can take that as you will. The last vowel is chirek, which is a single dot under the letter. Chirek makes an E sound, like the I in machine. Like tsere, it's sometimes followed by a yud that becomes part of the vowel. Also like tsere, some people say it's pronounced differently when it has a yud than when it doesn't. Some say it's pronounced as a short I in sit when it doesn't have a yud, and as the I in machine when it does have a yud. But I don't always hear it that way. Now, I said earlier that the vowels are normally pronounced after they are consonants. So, for example, you would pronounce this, ba, but there's one exception to that. If the last letter in the word is chet, and the vowel under it is patach, the patach is pronounced before the chet instead of after it as usual. The best known example of this is the word ruach, which means spirit, reish, which makes an R sound, shurek, which makes the U sound, chet, which makes the throat clearing sound, and patach, which makes the ah sound. So you'd think this was pronounced rucha, but when the last letter is chet and it's followed by patach, the patach is pronounced first, ruach. I've seen some texts that write the patach a little to the right when this happens, to make it more clear, but that's not common. So that's the entire Hebrew alphabet in just under 10 minutes. If you'd like to go a little deeper, I also have a series of videos that helps you tell the letters apart, and introduces some useful Hebrew vocabulary by showing the letters within words.